Hello folks, Chad Stanton here, a professional woodworker of over 20 years, sharing my experiences with you. So this is part 2 of a 3-part series on making the 3-legged round coffee table. Now at the end of part 1, I had a piece of elm that I was going to use for the top, but it was warped. And I didn't show it in the video, but I used a couple of winding sticks and an electric hand plane. If you're interested in the steps for doing that, I do have a video in the link below, and you can flatten any slab with just a couple of simple tools. Now this video picks up where I've already cut the circle of the elm on the bandsaw. And then when I placed it on top of the legs, well, it wasn't wide enough. It was 17 inches across. So it kind of looked like a short, wide stool instead of a round coffee table. I needed to have the top at least 3, maybe 4 inches more for it to look like an actual table. The problem is I'm building this table all out of scrap wood I had laying around the shop. So I didn't have another piece of wood that was thick enough and wide enough to accommodate that. So here's my solution to making the top bigger. Okay, to make this bigger, well, I have to add some wood to it. And here's the piece that I'm going to use. Now this is the right thickness and it's the right length, and I've had this thing probably laying around in my shop for at least 15 years. So let me show you how I'm going to attach this to that. Alright, here's all my pieces. I cleaned them up a little bit. I got them all cut and laid out on the bench. Now, how I figured out what this angle was, I got a separate video on that that'll show the geometry for it. And also too, even though you work out the geometry, sometimes there's things that can be off just a little bit with the saw when you make the cut. So I'll show you a tip on that as well in that geometry video. Okay, so from here, what I'll do is I will place my top on here, and I'm going to want to measure from side to side, going all the way around this, to make sure that I do really have this in the center or center-ish on these extra pieces. Now, another problem I have, and again, this was totally made up on the fly, when I cut this out on the bandsaw, I just freehanded it. So it's not a perfect circle. There's a little irregular spots on it. So to try and minimize the gaps that I'm going to have between the circle and the additional piece, not only will I trace my circle on here, but then everywhere one of these joints are for this piece, I'm going to mark that on the circle. So let's do that now, like so. And then I'm going to label the pieces, so like 1, and then 1, 2, 2, all the way around, all 6 pieces. Then I'll cut those out, and hopefully, it's not going to be perfect, but hopefully it'll line up a little bit closer. And then I have one extra trick that I'm going to try to really make sure that this is a decent looking fit from the new pieces to the old. So I did just that. I took the individual pieces, I cut them on the bandsaw, put it all back in here. I have one of these ratchet straps on here, so it's all compressed together. And pretty much what I thought was going to happen did. So in some spots, I've got it really nice, almost a perfect fit. And you know, this was all just freehand. But in other spots, I got a pretty big gap. So I'm not too worried about it at this point because I have an idea. And I think I'm going to turn this flaw into possibly a decorative detail. Right now, what I'm going to do to glue it up, I'm going to cut a couple of biscuits in each one of the pieces and then glue it all up and clamp it up, and then I will check on it in the morning. So here's something I didn't think of initially until I started working on it. So you can see I have my slot cut in for the biscuit, and in this case I'm using a number 10 size biscuit. And on the convex part of the circle, the slot was cut at the number 10 setting on the biscuit joiner. However, on the concave part, it couldn't get in deep enough. So what I wound up doing was I set it at a higher setting, which was a B, which is a bigger biscuit. And what that allowed me to do was to get that blade in there deeper to accommodate the biscuits. So, okay, just a little tip I thought I'd share with you, and now I'm going to glue this up. After drying all night, I got the clamps off it. I think originally I was thinking, you know, an inch to maybe an inch and a half bigger. But I'm going to cut this larger and work my way down. So I'll cut it larger, put it on the legs, stand back, look at it, and I'll slowly keep bringing it down. Now, because this board was used, it had some holes in it. So this is the bottom side, by the way. So here's a couple of holes. So what I did, I measured over 3 inches, and it just misses this one hole here. So I think that's where I'm gonna cut it out at. So using my compass, I'll draw my circle, and then again, just on the bandsaw, I'm just gonna cut it freehand. So I went from the hexagon and took it down to 3 inches, but even with that 3 inches on there, it still looked too large. So I cut another 1.5 inches off, and this looks appropriate now. This looks like the right size. However, I'm thinking I just want to make it appear a little bit thinner, so I'm gonna put a small chamfer on this bottom edge here. All right, so to put the chamfer on the bottom edge of this, I have my router and I have a 45-degree router bit in here. Now, I'm not gonna do this in 1 or even 2 passes. No, I'm gonna do it in multiple, many small little cuts going around. And here's why. So when you're routing on a piece on the outside edge, you wanna make sure that you go in a counterclockwise direction because of the rotation of the bit. Now take a look here. If I'm going this direction, the wood grain, you can see the wood grain is coming up. If I'm going this direction, I'm going to be okay on this wood grain. I'm not going to have any problems. But as I go around and come back, now I'm going against the grain, and this is going to want to possibly break out in big chunks, so I don't want that. And then when you consider the fact that all these pieces have the grain going different directions, I'm just going to go really slow, making very small cuts, and hopefully no problem. So there you can see a little chamfer on that, and I think that's going to be perfect for what I need for making this look a little bit thinner. Okay, I'm holding the camera, so this might be a little shaky. But you can see as I stand close, or as I'm sitting near the table, it looks decent, right? The thickness looks okay there. But then as I get up and say maybe walk across the room and look at it, the bevel reveals itself. That chamfer now you can see a little bit, and it makes the top look thicker from a distance. So that's a nice little technique that I use quite often on my tables. Once again, this is the top of the 3 legs. This is the bottom of the top piece. And theoretically, what I'm going to do is just ultimately screw through this plywood into the top piece. But you know what? I thought, just in case someone sitting on a chair from across the room looks and sees this little gap, so the legs, it doesn't look like the legs go into the top, right? So what I decided to do is I traced the triangle on there, And then I have a 3/8 upcut spiral bit in the router, and I have the depth set to 1/2 inch, the same thickness as what that plywood was. And I'm going to route that out, and then when I place this down, not only will the plywood be concealed and housed within the top, but these legs will, from the side, look like they go right into the top. So the router did most of the work and made most of the mess, but it did it pretty fast and pretty quick. As far as getting into the corners there, I just used a chisel. This is an Irwin. I really like these chisels. And you can just pound them, stake them in there, and then just clean out the corner. And then our legs fit nice and flush. Okay, so I'm back to dealing with the top and these gaps. And as you can see, in some areas, it fit real nice. I wish I thought this through so I could have got that fit on everything. But you can see some of them are pretty gappy. So what my thought is I'm not going to be able to eliminate that, but I thought I could conceal it. And what I plan on doing is routing a V-groove going all the way around on this, and then filling that V-groove in with maybe some kind of epoxy. So let me show you the setup that I'm going to do to route that groove. Okay, one method to do this groove is first you have to find the center of your circle. Now, I did a video a while ago where I make this simple jig out of some scrap wood, and if you're interested in making this and seeing how it works, well, I've got a link in the description below. So once I have the center of my table, what I then would do is use a router and a trammel. Now, a trammel is something you can buy commercially, or you can just make one. And essentially what you do is you have some kind of arm or rod, and you would take a nail and put that through the center of the table, and then your router would come out here and it would be fixed to the arm where this groove is going to go, and essentially it just swivels, it pivots on that and would make the groove for me. This is very popular and it's done a lot. However, in my case, as stupid as it sounds, I really don't want to have a little tiny nail hole in the center of my table when it's done. So I've come up with another method. So I have my small little cordless router and a scrap piece of wood. And what I did was I first made sure that the router is lined up right with where my groove is going to go, okay? And then that's attached to the scrap piece of wood. Once I get that router bit lined up in the middle, I'm going to take a pen or marker, and I'm going to mark the bottom of this plate, the circumference of what the table is, okay? From there then, what I'm going to do is I put a couple of dowels through right at the edge of this circle, all right? Now, in theory, as long as I keep these two dowel rods against the edge of the table, I can move this all the way around, and my router will make that groove for me right on that line, okay? So I'm going to try that and see how it goes. Okay, I don't know if you can tell from the camera there, but it worked rather well. It's given me about a 1/4 inch wide V groove. Now I can still see my gaps, but that's hopefully going to get concealed and filled in with that epoxy. And the router and the jig worked really well. Now a couple of things I do want to point out, that when you're routing on the inside of something, you're going clockwise, and then when you're routing on the outside edge of something, you go counterclockwise. And as I was coming around on this side across from me, I failed to keep both pins on that edge, and so I pushed it out a little. But not a big deal. It was small, and I was able to go in with a V chisel and kind of true it up, clean it up. I don't think anyone's going to be the wiser. All right, so the next part is to do epoxy. Now, I do not use epoxy much. I do not know a whole lot about it, but I have a good friend, John Kaczynski, over at Jack's Woodworking, and I've asked him to stop by and take a look at this for me. Now, that's part 2 of the 3 parts to make this coffee table. And if you enjoy this, please hit the like, subscribe, notification bell, and share the video because it definitely helps me with my rankings here on YouTube. Also, too, if you find value in the tips and the information that I'm sharing with you, well, I would ask you to kindly hit that thanks tab down there to let me know. It truly will be greatly appreciated. Okay, real quick, let's talk about what's coming up in part 3. So I mentioned that I'm going to put some epoxy in it, but I'm not very skilled or have much knowledge of epoxy. So I asked my friend John Kaczynski over at Jack's Woodcraft to stop by the shop here and show me what he does, because he does a lot of epoxy. He's going to share with you the type that he uses, why he uses that type. He gives some good advice, and some of the tips are so simple, but I never would have thought of it. So if you're interested in starting out in epoxy, I think this will be a good video for you. Now, at this point of the video, it's just about over, but I do want to let the new viewers know out there, down below in the description box is a list to the tools that I actually use. I'm not paid and endorsed to say any of them. If you're interested in what they are, there's a link for that. Also, too, I'm a big advocate for reading. I have a huge library collection of books. If you're interested in the books that I enjoy and would recommend, there's a link for that as well. And also, too, if you are on Facebook, you can join our group page where you can share your projects or just look for inspiration. And also, the newsletter comes out every month, once a month, free. So again, if you're interested in that, sign up at the link below. We have several different contributors for that to hopefully give you a wide range of different information for your woodworking. And of course, as always, if you have a question or a problem you're working on in your shop, well, feel free to email me at woodchoppingtime@gmail.com, because my whole goal is to make you a better woodworker. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, keep on dancing.